I'm looking at a trend of life expectancy around the world. And we can clearly see from this chart that unlike the United States, the rest of the world is clearly not confused about what kills people during a pandemic and what doesn't, right? Last week I showed a chart of life expectancy in the United States, and what was really crazy about it is they're claiming that COVID is erasing a year, 2 years, some even more, of life expectancy from the United States. And when you did the math, none of it added up, right? One in 300 people were dying of COVID-19. Each one of them was losing less than a decade of life expectancy on average. And you did the math, it came out to only a few weeks of life expectancy that was lost, right? Not years, right? And the rest of the world doesn't bear this out. Now, you might say Americans had more COVID. Let's take a look at the COVID live chart. Around the world, more than 500 million people have gotten COVID-19. These are the total cases out of a world population of 8 billion. I'm not sure if those are cases or people, right? Some people have gotten COVID-19 multiple times. 541 million have recovered. Total death is 6.396 million or so. I gotta point out something. Everybody dies of a cause, right? The day you die, you can test your blood for all sorts of issues, right? People who live with HIV eventually die as well, right? Right now, the life expectancy of somebody with HIV is not that far from your non-HIV positive person, right? If we wanted to, we could test everybody who died for HIV and claim that's what they died of, right? We could test everybody who's died to see if they've consumed a soda in the last month, right? If they did, oh my god, soda is killing probably billions of people every year under that kind of measure, right? We could survey people and see in the month leading up to their death, did they watch television? Did they vote for Biden? You get the idea, right? I gotta point that out, right? At some point, they were testing practically everybody who died if they had COVID-19, at least here in the United States. The rest of the world seems to remember that people actually do die at some point. But 6 million, let's trust that number. Out of 8 billion people, that's actually, they've broken it down for us, right? The deaths per 1 million population. 800 people, roughly, out of every million have died of COVID-19, right? Let's do the math there. If everybody who died on average of COVID-19 lost 10 years, which I showed in the last video, 1 out of every 1,000 people is losing 10 years of life expectancy. We would lose 0.1 years of life expectancy. And over the last half century or so, we've gained 4 decades of life expectancy. Now, I can guarantee you we didn't gain 30, 40 years of life expectancy by staying home and quarantining. I can guarantee you that part. And I remember that first week of quarantine very well, because I've had healthy habits for many decades before the quarantine itself. I had gone to my favorite grocery store to stock up, and everybody was hoarding junk food, they were hoarding the beer, practically nobody was hoarding healthy food. I had the whole healthy food aisle to myself. I got a lot of baking chocolate. I got a lot of supplements. My big fear during the quarantine was that things were going to get out of control and they would have to institutionalize people, and I would be locked up in a situation where I didn't have access to healthy foods. I have autism, which I control very well with my diet. When I was a teenager, I spent some time in juvenile hall. I spent a couple days in jail, believe it or not, when I was an adult. And both times I had difficult, and then I was hospitalized with food poisoning while traveling. And all of those times, the main difficulty was to get people to accept that I needed to eat differently. And my big fear was that I would get locked up with asymptomatic COVID, or not even COVID at all, just people scared of anything, right? Not be given the right foods, have a mental breakdown of some sort, or actually get sick, compromise my immune system, actually get COVID, and go in a downward spiral from there. And so for many weeks, I walked around with a big backpack full of dried food every time I went out, just in case something like that were to happen. I also thought about something else I could do if I got locked up like that. I could stop eating altogether and fast, not only to avoid consuming the junk foods that they might want to feed me, but also as a form of protest, right? A hunger strike. I also thought about that. So I was kind of prepared for that scenario. But at the grocery store, everybody had other plans. They were hoarding junk food. They were hoarding DVDs to watch, to binge watch, right? Or maybe not DVDs, but streaming services. And I thought, oh man, you know, at the end of COVID, we're gonna have a pandemic of heart disease, of all sorts of other problems. And I thought, well, I'm gonna have the entire trail to myself. I was living in Redmond at the time, and there's a bicycle trail. I'm gonna have that trail all to myself because nobody's gonna do that. I head out to the trail, and it's not as dire as I think. People are using that trail, and then it occurred to me. There are the people who had healthy habits took them on steroids. The people who had unhealthy habits, who were maybe drinking a soda every day, now drink a 2-liter soda every day, right? And I thought to myself, our health outcomes are going to be kind of bipolar by the end of this whole COVID lockdown. And unfortunately, it looks like other countries have taken it much more in stride, right? Use this as an opportunity to change some bad habits. Now, what's really sad is that in the United States, the people who have the unhealthy habits tend to reproduce at a much higher rate, right? So over a long period of time, that's why life expectancy is decreasing, right? The people who are drinking the Corona beer during the you know, having a pandemic of Corona drinking, right? And binge watching stuff, and doing all these other bad habits, that they also like to fuck each other and reproduce, right? And so the population we have the demographics of what we have 10 years ago is probably very different from what we had 10 years previous, right? In other countries, they don't seem to forget the whole purpose of what it means to stay healthy and what it means to reproduce, right? Anyway, the rest of the world is not confused about all of this, and they're still living longer this year than they were last, and they recognize that COVID-19 is only a blip, right? We didn't get to 80 years of life expectancy by staying home and by locking ourselves up, and certainly not by hating each other, right?